This video is brought to you by Brilliant. On Thursday evening, the US and UK launched joint airstrikes against the Houthis, an Iran-backed militia who control most of western Yemen. This comes after months of attacks from the Houthis against commercial ships transiting through the Red Sea, disrupting Euro-Asian trade and undermining America's role as the world's maritime police. So in this video, we're going to look at the strikes, how Iran and the Houthis might respond, and whether this marks another rung on the slightly terrifying ladder of escalation. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So let's start with a quick recap of what's happening in the Red Sea and why the US and the UK intervened. Essentially, most of western Yemen is currently controlled by the Houthis, an Iran-backed militia who've been fighting a war against Yemeni government forces, backed by Saudi Arabia, for the past few years. Today, they control most of Yemen's population centres, including the capital Sana'a, and almost all of what used to be North Yemen before Yemen's unification in 1990. Anyway, since declaring war on Israel in October, the Houthis have been attacking both commercial and military ships transiting through the Red Sea and the Bab al-Mandab Strait, which connects the Red Sea to the Arabian Sea. As we've detailed in previous videos, the Red Sea is a super important international trade route for essentially two reasons. First, most oil and liquefied natural gas from Arab countries going to Europe goes out the Persian Gulf, around the Arabian Peninsula, through the Red Sea into Europe. Second, most goods going from China and other East Asian countries to Europe also go through the Red Sea. Europe imports a lot of oil and buys a lot of stuff from China, which is why something like 30% of global container traffic goes through the sea. The frequency of these attacks escalated in December, prompting 4 of the big shipping companies to announce that they would no longer sail through the Red Sea. In practice, this means that ships going to Europe will now have to sail around Africa via the Cape of Good Hope, which adds something like 3,000 nautical miles to the journey and will make European imports slightly more expensive. Unsurprisingly, this didn't go down well in Europe, but it's also an issue for Egypt, which relies on Suez Canal tolls for a significant fraction of its foreign currency, and the US, which has traditionally been responsible for guaranteeing maritime trade through the Red Sea and elsewhere. A few days later, the US announced an international maritime coalition to protect ships transiting through the region, in an attempt to convince commercial tankers to continue using the strait and bring down global shipping costs. Unfortunately for the West, this didn't really work. The Houthis continued to hassle ships passing through the Red Sea, and most big shipping companies said they would still avoid the Red Sea. Realising that their current plan wasn't working, the West apparently decided they needed to do something more drastic to deter the Houthis. So, late on Thursday, a US-led coalition struck over 60 military targets at 16 Houthi-controlled locations in Yemen, including command and control nodes, munitions depots, launching systems, production facilities, and air defence radar systems. The operation was supported by Australia, Bahrain, Canada, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, New Zealand, and South Korea, but actually carried out by just the US and the UK. Most of the strikes were carried out by jets off a US aircraft carrier already in the region, but the UK sent 4 RAF jets from Cyprus to assist. At time of writing, we don't have that much detail on where the strikes actually landed, but there have been reports of fires in the capital Sana'a and the port of Hodeidah, and the UK's Ministry of Defence has implied that the strikes were successful, with a statement claiming that early indications are that the Houthis' ability to threaten merchant shipping has taken a blow. In the same statement, the MOD said particular care had been taken to minimise risk to civilians, and Rishi Sunak released a statement describing the strikes as limited, necessary and proportionate action in self-defence. On the other side of the Atlantic, US President Joe Biden has released a statement describing the strikes as a clear message that the United States and our partners will not tolerate attacks on our personnel or allow hostile actors to imperil freedom of navigation in one of the world's most critical commercial routes. Both Biden and US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin also warned the US would be prepared to take further action to protect US forces. Houthi forces claimed to have instantly retaliated, but a US military official denied late on Thursday night that any Houthi response had so far materialised. So what happens next? Well, it's possible that these strikes will reduce the Houthis' ability to disrupt maritime trade in the Red Sea. But it's worth noting that the Houthis have endured years of similar strikes from the Saudi-led coalition in the Yemeni civil war, and these never fully degraded the Houthis' military capabilities. But perhaps the big question is how Iran responds. Iran and its proxies, most notably Hezbollah, have been surprisingly quiet so far. In their public statements, both Iran and Hezbollah have stressed that they didn't have any direct involvement in the October the 7th attacks, and Iran has so far refrained from direct attacks on Israel and its allies. In response to Thursday's strikes, all we got was a statement from Iran's foreign ministry describing the strikes as a clear violation of Yemen's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and a breach of international laws, regulations, and rights. This is presumably because Iran knows it can't afford a full-on war with Israel at the moment. The Iranian regime is struggling with recurring protests, what looks like a resurgent ISIS, and a succession crisis, as Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, who's now 84, gets ready to hand over the reins. However, Iran might be forced to intervene if it looks like its entire proxy network is being dismantled. Hamas has been at least degraded in Gaza. The Houthis are facing direct attacks from the US, and Israeli officials are now saying they plan on attacking Hezbollah in southern Lebanon next. Without Hamas, the Houthis, or Hezbollah, Iran's strategic abilities and influence would be dramatically reduced, which is why it's hard to imagine Iran just letting this happen. We've already seen some tentative signs of escalation recently. In December, they sent a warship into the Red Sea after a handful of Houthis were killed by an American helicopter. And on Thursday, they seized an American-linked oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman, although this is allegedly related to an ongoing dispute between Iran and the US over the tanker. Ultimately, it's possible that these strikes do exactly what they were intended to do: sufficiently degrade the Houthis to the point that commercial transit can return to the Red Sea. However, as with all military action, it carries escalatory risk, especially vis-à-vis Iran. And if the past few months or even years have taught us anything, it's that escalation is often harder to avoid than it seems. As we step into 2024, many of us are contemplating our New Year's resolutions, always looking to improve ourselves and learn more about the world around us. And while our content is always a good starting point, a lot of stuff we talk about can seem pretty complicated, especially when we dive into analytics and detailed data. But luckily, there's a fun and easy way to learn more, which also doesn't cost thousands of dollars or take years and years of schooling. That's because Brilliant is the best way to learn maths, data science, and computer science interactively. And the good thing is, it doesn't take long to learn either. These complex topics are broken down into small but accessible chunks, designed around your busy schedule. Even just a few minutes a day can help you with accumulating new knowledge over time in a fun and engaging way. As time goes on, you'll also get used to that empowering feeling of learning too, because Brilliant isn't just about memorization and lectures. Brilliant teaches you by doing, using active learning techniques to teach you the principles behind otherwise quite complex subjects, and ensuring you actually understand what's going on. So whether you want to brush up on your basic math skills, improve your employment prospects, or just have another New Year's resolution for 2024, you can check out everything Brilliant has to offer free for a full 30 days by going to brilliant.org/TLDR. Plus, the first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. Thanks for your support.